Welcome back to Call Time with Katie Birnbaum. I'm so pleased to have my guest with me today, someone who is very near and dear to my heart, as well as a personal and professional mentor of mine, the wonderful dancer, actor, general counsel of the Araca Group, and most importantly, I say in a biased fashion, my college choreographer with the Princeton Triangle Club for 4 years, the incredible Hans Kriefall. Welcome, Hans.
Hey, hi Katie. Thanks for having me. What an intro.
Well, I'm not even done. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Hans, any of our viewers, Hans attended Princeton University, where he was a member of the Princeton Triangle Club, and I believe an officer. Is that correct?
Yep, vice
Great.
president my senior year.
So after he did that, he kickstarted a career as a Broadway dancer, first touring with West Side Story on the European tour before moving on to dance in the national tours of A Chorus Line, Jesus Christ Superstar, and the Broadway production of Cats. Clearly, Hans was the king of the 1980s mega musical, which I'm sure we will also talk about. And after all this, Hans pivoted somewhat and went to law school, which served him well, as he is now the general counsel, as I mentioned, of the Araca Group, a vertically integrated theatrical production and brand activation company. So it seems like Hans found a way to combine his passions in a practical sense, which we will also get to later. And finally, Hans served as the production choreographer for the Princeton Triangle Club from 2007 to 2018, where he continues to serve as vice president of the board of trustees. And I'm super excited to have a guest like this on the show. Firstly, because I've had a lot of like principal actors on the show, and I think the ensemble or the chorus of a show, particularly in musicals, are the lifeblood of the show. And I think people, or a type of career that sometimes gets short shrift. So I'm really eager to talk about that and give that the recognition it deserves. And also talk about the importance of educational theater, which of course is what the Princeton Triangle Club was that I was involved in and that Hans remains involved in. So welcome. Are there any glaring inaccuracies in that little intro?
No, I think you got it. I was corrected the other day. Alan, the chair of the board of trustees of Triangle, reminded me I'm not vice president, I'm vice chair. So perhaps I should
Got
make
it.
that correction in case he monitors this and checks me once again. But other than that, yeah, those were my credits, such as they were. Each one of them a joy.
Well, I can't wait to discuss. Do you know what the difference is between chairman slash president and vice chairman slash vice president?
No, and I told him that. I said, Alan, I believe that's a distinction without a difference, but so be it.
Well, maybe when I have Alan Jackson on the show, we can further investigate that. Well, I'm so thrilled to have you on. I want to start at the very beginning, a very good place to start, and ask you about your first exposure to theater and dance, what it was, and if there was a moment, a sort of aha moment when you were able to say to yourself, "Oh, I can maybe actually do this. I could maybe do this for a career."
Yeah, I actually remember very clearly when I was, I don't know, I must have been in first grade and my brother was in third grade, and the graders were doing a play, and my brother was cast in the lead in the title role of Hansel and Gretel, which a role I feel should have been mine had I been a third grader. So of course I loved it. And that's pretty common. I don't know why folks fall in love with theater, but I knew I wanted to do theater just in school. Really, I just wanted to be in the school play, and it seemed that wherever I went, as soon as I arrived, like my brother, who was 2 years older, would get through the program, and then they would shut it down, like right when I got there. So I felt like I was kept being denied, the opportunity to perform. And the funniest thing is when I got to high school, he was a senior and I was a sophomore, and I didn't get into the fall play. But I said, well, he's going to graduate, and then I will get a chance to be on the stage. And then the stage burned down. So I really didn't have a chance to be on the stage, and I was like thwarted again. So that
So there
was
was just no theater program for the rest of your.
we did plays in the cafeteria. We did them like on the floor with like no set or a horrible set, and it was and to my to my naive point of view, well, that's not a real play because it's not, in the gym, on the raised proscenium with a curtain. Like to me, that's what theater meant. And, because I knew nothing about, how varied and different theater can be. So I really made up for it then when I got to college, and I just, auditioned for everything and, did 4 years of Triangle, which is on the biggest, most proper stage you can possibly imagine. So I finally got a chance to perform for real, when I got to college and, made the most of it.
Um, First of all, I want to say that picturing you doing plays and musicals in the school cafeteria is really making me laugh, especially you saying that you imagined theater would be on this proscenium, on the raised proscenium in the gym, because I'm imagining that now people would pay tons of money to see like a site specific production of something in a high school cafeteria.
I know we were totally ahead of our time. But the funniest thing was the director was really lazy that year, and he's passed on, so we can speak openly about him. But he didn't even like there was a salad bar like sort of to the side of the stage, and like he didn't even bother moving it. So like our exit was like crossing in front of the salad bar. I was like, we site specific is fine, but we could have worked like a little harder to get like a better production value. But
That's
that
amazing.
was my training.
That's amazing. And so when you got to college, I was going to ask what drew you to the Princeton Triangle Club, but also I'd love to hear it from you for viewers who may not be familiar. How would you describe what Triangle is?
Uh, I do this a lot as vice chair of the club when I'm introducing it to folks that we're interviewing for positions and stuff. It's a student group, and each year it produces a student written and student performed brand new original musical, whether review or book, um, under a professional guidance with a professional creative team. So it's sort of like the perfect mix of like a big musical and student energy and sort of professional aspirations and polish layered on top of it. So it really kind of had everything. And for someone like me who had never done a musical before coming to college, that was the real kicker. We did plays in the cafeteria, but we didn't have a chance at attempting a musical. I mean, no one had that kind of know-how in my
Well, with the
hometown.
salad bar that close, the
Yeah.
acoustics would have been a nightmare.
Who knows? Yeah. That would have been tricky, even trickier. So when I told, when I met some upperclassmen, as a freshman, oh, I really want to do musicals, and they're like, oh, you just need to do Triangle. And and then in those days, Triangle would do like a regular book musical like Applause or Best Little Whorehouse or Threepenny Opera in the fall, and then they would do their big original production in the spring. So you could do two Triangle shows a year, and that was my gateway drug into musical theater.
That's so interesting. I had no idea you had never done a musical before, which is fascinating because it seems to me that that's where you made the meat and potatoes of your career, especially as a dancer. So was Triangle your first exposure to dancing as well?
Not I took my first dance class was actually at Princeton, in a PE class because I don't know if you guys had a PE requirement.
We did
Um,
not.
yeah, there were two weird things at school when I started. There was a swimming requirement where they like threw you in the deep end of Dillon Pool and you had to tread water for 10 minutes. Like that was the swim test. And there was also a PE requirement. So I went to the open house for PE classes, and there was a Triangle dancer who had been a professional dancer before coming to Princeton. His name was Mark Melodia. He was 2 years ahead of me, and he said, "Oh, I'm teaching a jazz dance class," and I was like, "I'll take that as my PE." So he was my first dance teacher, and then also in the that winter, my freshman year, he directed a production of Pippin on campus at Theater On Team, another a smaller student theater on campus, and I auditioned for him, and then I got my first leading role in a no, only leading role in a musical when I played Pippin for him my freshman year.
I would kill to see you play Pippin.
The video is available. I can send it to you.
Please do.
Yes.
Please do.
Yeah, my husband saw it and I showed him a scene and he said, "Well, you're not really acting so much as doing a parody of acting." And it was just like, ugh, knife through the heart. So,
A harsh critic.
yeah,
Well,
it's a tough room here at home.
so you started doing Triangle, and is Triangle sort of what convinced you that you could that that's what you wanted to do following graduation? Like, did you go to Princeton saying to yourself, I think I'm going to be an actor or a dancer, or did you think you were going to go do something else?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I specifically remember choosing Princeton because I didn't want to be forced to choose between like a conventional degree or a legitimate degree and a theater degree. Haha, as if I was this great talent that the conservatories were fighting for.
Were.
It was so pretentious. But I said no, I like Princeton because they don't. It's not. I don't have to have a theater degree. I can just get an English degree and do the program in theater and do a lot of theater, and then I'll be like have a normal college experience. And then of course I did all the theater that I could, and I ended up writing my thesis on musical theater and stuff.
Did you? What
Uh,
did you write your thesis on?
I just did. It was on Rodgers and Hammerstein, Lerner and Loewe, and Stephen Sondheim, and just on the sort of evolution of the modern American musical. Um,
Just that
just
small
just
thing.
that, just but at the time that was kind of a new topic. Like not a
Okay.
lot. It wasn't until after I graduated that like Ethan Morden's book came out on Rodgers and Hammerstein, and like he stole all my ideas. It's like the darkness and the conflict and the shadows, and I was like, that was my thesis. Some of it was good. Some of it was my stuff on Sign Time totally off the mark. Like I don't think I really understood his work when I go back and read some of those chapters. But the stuff on Raj and Hammerstein, I think I really got. And it's funny. I showed it to. I was socially friends with Adam Gettle for a period. He was dating a friend of mine, and he said, "Oh, I have to give this talk on South Pacific at a school, and I've never even seen it." And I said, "Well, you're in luck. I've got a 10 pages on South Pacific right here on the shelf. Let me give it to you." And he's like, and so he read it. So that was my claim. That was my thesis's claim to fame, that it actually made its way into the hands of Adam Gettle.
But isn't Adam Gettle related to
He is
one?
the grandson of Richard Rodgers, and
And he had
yes,
never seen South
never
Pacific?
seen South Pacific. Correct.
Wow. I'm amazed. You were the gateway for him. That's incredible. Um, so you did Triangle, and that sort of threw you into the deep end of theater. But as you say, Triangle is, it is different from the kind of training you get at a BFA program, for example. And there are these things that make it unique, as you say, that it's an original musical written by the writers, relies more on sketch comedy than traditional acting. But I'm curious whether you still view it as effective pre-professional training for people interested in a career in theater.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the thing that's special about Triangle is the scale,
Mm.
both of the production itself, which has, upwards of, or 26 folks in the cast. So you're working on a big stage, or we're working with a big cast, and then you're also working on a big stage. And that is, it's the largest stage on the Princeton campus, and there's an element of that performance and frankly just a familiarity of being in a space that big and performing that I found super valuable when I arrived in New York City and went to my first audition. My first audition in New York City was an open call for Cats, like in 1988, and it was on the stage of one of the theater. I can't remember which
Wow,
one.
they were still doing auditions in the
Oh,
theater.
yeah, then it was the audition was in the theater, and I remember when I went up for the dance call. They typed us in first. You had to say your name, your age, something you'd never be allowed to ask now, and do a double pirouette. And then they told you whether you could stay to dance. And I just wanted to learn the combination. That was my only goal. And I did get to stay to dance. But I remember thinking like, oh, this is just like being in a triangle rehearsal, because I'm on a big stage and, there's a theater. It was a feeling like learning a combination on a stage like that was something I had done before. And I thought, and I remember that feeling very specifically. I know what this feels like. And so I think that helped me.
Do you think, though, that the emphasis on the element of sketch comedy, which I've always found very unique about Triangle, do you think that that was helpful for you moving forward with your career?
Yeah, because I think, well, first of all, I never drew a distinction between, oh, this is sketch comedy acting and this is real acting. I mean, it's all acting.
Yeah.
So,
But I think a lot of people unfortunately do, which I think makes you less good at sketch comedy.
yeah, and I think also a lot of dancers will say like, "Oh, I can't really act." And it's like, well, you better learn, because you're on stage and you're playing someone who's not yourself, and that's pretty much what we call acting. So, consider yourself an actor and dig into that. So, I think that so yeah, I did find it helpful, because anytime you get to play another role, that's more exposure. I remember, I mean, once I played like the Yale quarterback with, for some reason, I had a Texas accent. So, I got to do a crazy Southern accent. I played Vice President, George Bush, in a sketch about Reagan. I think variety and exposure and challenges are always good for an actor. And again, ideally you'll get to do those with someone who will sort of, you know, help you along and help you find the truest sense of that character.
Specifically, the sketch comedy element of Triangle, I think I return to a lot when I work, because I think so much of comedy is about timing. And I think performing, especially if you're in the ensemble and you have like two lines, it's so much of it is about timing to make that really land and really like hit your joke. And I also think, as you say, about variety, because of the pace at which we have to do Triangle, and because it is humor and supposed to be a comedy, you're forced to make really, really strong choices with your scenes. And I think that is probably one of the most helpful skills I learned in Triangle, especially in terms of auditioning, because you take that and then you have to go into the room and you make a really strong choice, and they may like it or they may not, but they're never going to like a mediocre choice or an in-between choice. So that's my little spiel about sketch comedy and Triangle. So you did that, and then at some point you said, like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah, and you know what it was? I wanted to speak to that, because I actually remember the decision process that I used, that, I'm going to go to New York and make it,
Yeah.
which is, and there's two, one is that I said, well, so it was senior year and everyone's interviewing for jobs at the career center. And I didn't even know what the jobs were, like, working for Macy's as a buyer, like what does that even mean? I had no concept of that. And I didn't know anything about investment banking or any of that other stuff. And I said, well, what do I like doing? And I said, my favorite thing is going to rehearsals. So why don't I just try, and maybe I'll get to act, and then I can keep going to rehearsals. So that was my thought process. And I asked my Triangle choreographer, who was a working New York professional. And I said, hey, should I try to make it in New York City? And she gave me really good advice, because let's just be clear, like, I wasn't that good. I had some talent, but it was very raw.
So what did she say?
She said, I think the best thing you can do when you're young is go to New York and give it a try. And if you love it, you can stay and do it forever. And if you don't, you can leave and say, well, I gave it a shot. And I said, that sounds like sound advice. And so that's what I did. And I started taking classes in the city and then going to auditions and working, and I stayed.
So what was your first professional show that you did post college, and what was that experience like?
Oh, it was great. It was It was actually my first audition was for Cats, on that Broadway stage that I already told you. And my second audition was for a European tour of West Side Story. And it was a tour that was doing the original or close to the original Jerome Robbins choreography. And that was West Side Story movie was my gateway drug. I mean, that's the show that made me want to be a dancer. I saw that when I was in seventh grade on TV, and I was like, that is what an amazing movie. And, so that had always been on my list, West Side Story. So that was my second audition, and I got the job, one of the jets. And
That was your second
my
audition?
second audition. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's important to point out that if you're, going to do a European bus and truck, of one-nighters playing, both grand and dingy little theaters in Europe, not everyone is going to audition for that show. So,
Sure, sure. You weren't always playing La Scala.
yeah, yeah. Though we did play like the Palais de Festival in Cannes. I mean, we played some really grand stages, and then we also played like parking lots and bull rings. I mean, it was kind of absurd,
That sounds
but
incredible, though.
it was incredible. And talk about Triangle experience. When we toured with Triangle, we were on the bus all day, and then we'd arrive at about noon, and then we'd hang all the lights and cable the electrics and roll the costumes in. So tour was tough, and then when I got to my first professional tour, the equity actors on the bus were complaining, oh, these bus rides are so long, and we don't have many days off, and this is just excruciating because we're not protected by the union. And I said, what do you mean? We don't even have to hang the electrics. Like, this is easy.
That was going to be my next question for you, because I know that you did do a number of sort of paying your dues, non-equity tours and productions, in addition to dinner theater and stuff like that. And I'm curious what your take on those experiences were, and whether you think they prepared you or didn't prepare you for Broadway.
Yeah, I mean, 100% valuable. I think the best advice I can give a young actor is go to the audition. And work begets work. When I look back on my non-equity gigs, I did a non-equity tour of Me and My Girl after, what the model, I think the model is the same now, but what they used to do is the Broadway tour would send out the first national, and then they would close it, and then a non-equity company would buy the production. So they would buy the Broadway tour set and the costumes, and they would mount a non-equity tour and then go do the one-nighters. And so that was one of my first jobs, was a national, a non-equity national of Me and My Girl. Well, one of the most talented actors I worked with, Rachel Casper, who's done like a million Broadway shows since then, she was in the company with me. And so, so some of the most talented people I met were in those non-equity companies in the early days. And you're doing, and we had a fabulous set because it was like a real set and costumes. And so you really got the feel of what it was like to be in a fully professional production, even if you were still just paying your dues as a non-equity chorus member. So I think that is so thoroughly valuable to do that kind of work. Yeah,
And it
I don't know
most
why you wouldn't, at that stage.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a valuable experience. I'm in the union now, and I'm glad to be, but uh I did some summer stock shows where I was living. I think the first summer that I did summer stock was the summer after um my freshman year of college, and I was living with five other girls in one room. And it's not an experience I would repeat necessarily, but it was one of those stocks where we were doing like a new show every week, so rehearsing the show during the day and then doing the show that we had rehearsed the week before at night. Again, not something I would necessarily repeat, but it does give you the training. I mean, doing 8 shows a week on Broadway is really intense, and if you've done stuff like that, you're definitely going to be more than prepared stamina wise for the Broadway, the professional schedule. But interestingly, in all of these shows that we're talking about that you did, regardless equity, non-equity, with the exception of Chorus Line, which is unique because the concept of a chorus line is that they're all ensemble members. You were in the ensemble, you were in the chorus, and I'm curious. I feel like you have always been outspoken about this as long as I've known you. What do you think is the value of being in the ensemble?
Um, I I've always gravitated towards the ensemble. You know, when there's a big dance number and the lead is on center, I start looking to who's dancing behind the lead because they're, with the exception of, certain leads, the ensemble is probably the better dancers, and I just love dance. So it may just be my bias, that was born, in my West Side Story viewing, that I just love dancing, and that's the thing I really wanted to focus on, and I found it was a really good fit for me, because it just seemed to be the most exciting. And I think if you bring that excitement and that ownership, and if you treat yourself as someone important to the show, then you will be, and you are
Yeah.
important to the show. I mean, I was in the ensemble of the Jesus Christ Superstar tour, and I was a swing, so I wasn't even always on. But when we brought the show to New York at the Paramount Theater for a week or 2 weeks, as part of the tour. Um, um, uh, I think it was Jay Binder came to the show, and I was just, in
Okay.
the, I was just, I just had an ensemble track, and he called me in, for an audition for Beauty and the Beast, having seen me in the ensemble, and he said, when he called me in, he said, "You were doing really good work up there," and I didn't even have any lines, I was just, flailing my long hair and, praising God, and, doing all the Jesus Christ Superstar stuff. But I think that that's a great example of people notice you. It's sort of a corollary there. You should think of yourself as an actor because people are watching you do something, and you should fill it with everything you've got, because if you think you're fading into the background, then you definitely will. um,
And it's unique, I think. Obviously, there are plays with larger ensembles and some, smaller musicals with smaller roles peppered in, but I definitely think of it as sort of a standard of first the golden age musicals and then the sort of mega musicals. And I think that's really cool that it's something unique to that art form. I guess there are extras in film, but it's a little different. Like when I see a big musical, I often pick one person in the ensemble at the beginning of the show. Usually I'm watching the first number and I decide like I'm intrigued by something about that person and I watch them in every production number. And
I do the same thing.
yeah, yeah. And you're absolutely right. You can tell when someone is phoning it in the ensemble, even if they're getting all the steps. Like of course they're getting all the steps, it's usually an amazing professional production, but you can tell the difference between someone who's phoning it in and someone who's savoring every moment that they have on stage.
And I think I was really lucky in that almost every show I did was very ensemble focused. So you think about Chorus Line, you think about Cats, even Jesus Christ Superstar. Those apostles are always on stage. So, or maybe it's just my view of it, but I always felt very integral to the show. And sometimes that was explicit, like in Chorus Line, where you are a named character and you are on the line and they are looking at you the whole time. Same with Cats. That's the title role, one of the cats.
Yeah,
But even in other shows where maybe you're just supporting, but I did a lot of shows where I had a lot of stage time, and those are the kind of shows I liked. I liked it when I was on stage the whole time. Quick costume change and back out for the next number. I mean, that's just a pleasure.
totally. But it's interesting because as I mentioned before, you did seem to do, and this is also partially because of when you were at the height of your dancing career, you did seem to do a lot of these big mega musicals that were popular in the 80s and 90s. And I'm curious first of all, do you think that your experience as an ensemble member was shaped by those types of shows? And also, I'm just curious for your thoughts on that type of show, because I think sometimes they now get people look down on them a little.
What I loved about the productions that I did is that the ensemble was such an integral part of it. And so, and I think anytime,
and I think you're right that they're on stage. Like, you think of a Golden Age musical as having a big ensemble, of course, but in a Golden Age musical, it's more like long chunks of book, long duets or solos, and then the townspeople come on for the production number. Whereas when you think of a show like Cats or Jesus Christ Superstar, as you say, they're on stage almost 100% of the time.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the best. That's what I always loved about doing musicals, And I do recall when I did Oklahoma in summer stock, and I thought, gosh, I'm actually don't even make my first entrance in Kansas City until like 45 minutes into the show.
I know.
Still a great show, still a show I love, but you're correct. The ensemble experience in a Golden Age book like that is very different from the ensemble. If you think about Chorus Line, it's an ensemble piece even when the girls are singing at the ballet and it's only 3 soloists, but the ensemble then creates the ballet class. Or you think about Cats, where it's a series of solos, like it's Rum Tum Tugger, it's Jenny Any Dots, or it's Old Deuteronomy, but the Cats are always on stage defining who that character is and how they relate to him. So you always have an action to do and a story to tell and a relationship to move forward. And that, so what I admire about the mega musicals is that they often use their ensemble in that kind of creative way. I mean, I guess I only did Superstar and Cats, but I remember
I would argue
remember going to see
sort of in that tradition.
Pardon me?
Oh, I was saying I would argue that Evita is sort of in that tradition.
Oh yeah, yep. And I did, and I did my production of Evita was so small. So yes, we were in everything because I think there were only like 6 ensemble members. It was the smallest Argentinian population ever.
Do you think that your experience as an ensemble member in these ensemble heavy mega musicals influences how you choreograph and direct today?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, every time I'm making a stage picture or, was making a stage picture, with Triangle, I would think about, the variety of how Michael Bennett, used the dancers basically as scenery. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but if there was no set in Chorus Line, it was just the silhouette of the sort of skyline of the dancers. That was the setting, and you realize that you can do, and it's done on an empty stage. And similarly with Cats, I mean, there's a lot of junk on stage, but essentially it's an empty playing space, and the cats create the world. So I'm always thinking about how that's what the audience really wants to be looking at. You can put anything behind them. It can be lavish or it can be simple, but the architecture that you're looking at is, how the dancers are arranged and, what they're doing and how they're bringing life to the music. So yeah, I leaned on those 2 shows. I think those 2 shows really shaped me, into how the dancers were used.
I should mention then that you did have this sort of full circle moment going back to choreograph for the Triangle Club in what I would describe as, in a totally non-biased fashion, as sort of the golden age of Triangle. And now you're vice chairman of the board of trustees. So I'm curious, what you had this really formative Triangle experience when you were young, and what did that return to the environment teach you, if anything, about theater or the making of theater?
the main thing it taught me was how lucky the Triangle Club members are,
Mm.
because the work that they were producing, in this golden age to which you refer, and which I remember very fondly indeed, it was so exciting. And I think I used to say that to you guys. I'm like, okay, you guys, this is a new number, it's a new production number, and wow, I would kill to perform in a number this good. This number is amazing. And that happened year after year and number after number within the same show. There was just a lot of really quality writing and music writing in particular. And I give a lot of credit to that, to Pete Mills, who is the music director and still is, thank God, of the club, for really drawing out and cultivating in those students, an appreciation for the range and the possibilities of musical theater. And that's something, that was true of my day in my day in the 80s when we were doing Triangle as well. But it's a much tighter, and it's a much more fertile ground now, I think, for new production numbers and new material and just new great songwriting. It was kind of hit or miss, in my day, because it wasn't as structured. The club has gotten a lot more diligent about sort of cultivating the process to make sure there's a full show to produce every year. I mean, some years in the 80s we were scrambling, like, oh, we don't, it's 3 weeks away and we only have 3 sketches written, because the process wasn't quite so refined as it is now. So first and foremost, just the quality of the material, and then now I'm at this point I've forgotten what the original question
Oh
was.
no,
What am I?
it was just about what returning taught you, if anything. But that's
Taught me? Yeah,
a
yeah,
great answer.
yeah. And then yeah, I don't know. You would have to tell me. I guess what I hoped, like, none of that was surprising to me, because as I said, my favorite thing when I was in college was rehearsing. And my favorite days in Triangle were when I had 6 hours of rehearsal and they would go by like that. Like, I would look at the clock and say, what, it's time to leave already? Like, I thought I would be exhausted by now, but it's like we're doing so much work, we didn't even have time to be exhausted. So that was always fun for me. And what I hoped the students would take away was that working this hard is fun, and that's the way you want to work. You don't want to go into an audition, into a rehearsal room and be lazy. You don't want to be reluctant. You want to go in and you want to start 5, 6, 7, 8. You want to start learning that combination, and you want to work it and work it and work it until it feels great. Because every time you run a number, like, the piano starts playing, you get to hear it one more time. How often in your life do you get to, listen to music like that and dance to it? That really only happens in a rehearsal studio. So that was not new to me. That's not something I learned in Triangle. It's certainly something I experienced in Triangle. And I hope it's something that the students took away, that, like, it is a privilege and a joy to work on musical theater.
Yeah, my litmus test for like who is a true musical theater lover is sort of the question of like rehearsal or performance, because I think some people get into it sort of for the adulation of the performance, and certainly that's great. Like, we're all narcissists to some extent, but there is something magical. The true fans know that the magic is in the rehearsal room, and the special magic that goes on there, the combination of the hard work and the inside jokes and all of that. And I feel like Triangle's such a good example of that, and you got to experience it again, which is so cool. I feel like you may have sort of already answered this when we were talking about how your experience with the mega musical influence when you choreograph and when you direct. But did you have any particular, or do you have any particular choreographers or directors that you worked with professionally or in your day of Triangle that you bring into the room when you choreograph now, so to speak, or in your head?
Um, yeah, I mean, I definitely, I mean, I really owe so many of my, my moves, such as they are, to, the first choreographer that I worked with in Triangle, a wonderful choreographer, Diana Baffabrill, who had been a June Taylor dancer back in the day and had done some Broadway shows. And she had every step in the book. And, I did 4 kick lines with her and, a bunch of production numbers, and she would do a serious ballet piece using the more, the more balletic dancers, not me at that time. And, she would do hoedowns and she would do, funky disco numbers. We're about to post one of her big numbers for the Triangle reunion. You'll see what Triangle in the 80s looked like with 50 people on stage.
Whoa.
But she did she did a number that was danced through the decades. So she did the 30s like a Fred and Ginger, and then she did the 40s with swing dance, and she did the 50s with a doo-wop number. She did the 60s, which was just an acid trip. She did disco for the 70s, and then she did sort of this up with people 80s. She just pulled that out of her hat. And I think we choreographed the 80s like at dress rehearsal, like 15 minutes, after, at between midnight and 12:15 one night. We hadn't finished the 80s, so she just put it together on the spot. So I certainly am indebted to her for just the richness and variety, of the vocabulary. And then I spent a lot of time doing chorus line and cats, so those moves are very much with me and near and dear to me, and choreography I very, very much admire. So chorus line is a little easier to steal from because it's, cats choreography, you can't really put it into your shows that often because it's so specific to that world.
There's a great moment in that documentary, Every Little Step, about chorus line, which I honestly am obsessed with, where Bjork Lee is teaching the chorus line combination, and she's like, "Don't do this. If you do this, I can I can tell you did cats." So good. I have to ask too that, so you had this career as a dancer, a quite incredible career. But then at a certain point, you went to law school and you now work at this theatrical branding and production company. May I ask why you made that transition, and if you still find yourself creatively fulfilled in your current role?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's always sort of a tough question. But luckily for me, I was in Cats when it still seemed like it would be running forever. And so I had a sense of, I can do this for as long as I want. And about 2 years into the run, I thought, well, I've been here 2 years.
Wow, you did Cats for 2 years.
I did it for 4. I did it for 4. So I'll tell you the rest of the story.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, it's like a second degree. I think I spent more time in Cats than I did in college, actually, if you think about it.
That is insane. Also, the calories you must have burnt every night.
Well, and as I like to say, it took me 4 years to get the choreography right because it was a very challenging show and you always had something to work on. I mean, it was very technical, it was very demanding, very physical, and you could always push yourself to the next level.
No, the people who have done Cats, like I know some people who are in the most recent revival or various other productions, and it's like a cult, and it's like a cult for a reason because it is so difficult, and it's like you're putting your body through a marathon every night, and sometimes
and not even a human marathon, like it's another creature and it's on a rake. That's what really kills you is when you start doing it on the rake, and it's like you think your back hurts now, like wait till you do it on the rake. But I was sort of listening to like, well, I've been here 2 years. It's probably time to move on and get my next show. And so I started going to auditions again, and I realized I didn't want any of those shows I was auditioning for as much as I wanted Cats. In that, like, well, I'm already doing a show where I'm on stage the whole time and I'm dancing, I'm doing choreography I love. Do I really want to do that for a show that might not have as much for me? And so I just kind of use that as like, oh, well, if I don't want to leave for another show, then I guess I should just leave when I'm ready. And so I stopped auditioning and just kind of wrote it out. And then I can't remember how I decided, how I picked my closing date. It just kind of felt there came a time when it's like, yeah, I just decided like, okay, I've done this and I'm happy with it. And you also get older, you know. I think I was 29 when I started the show and 33 when I left it. So, you know, your early 30s then, you know, to me it felt like I know what it was. I said I would have to reinvent myself as like a character actor or something, you know, and that held no interest to me. And I'm not disparaging character actors or that level ensemble work at all, but you know, my joy was dancing in the ensemble, and that's all I wanted to do. And you do that when you're young and healthy. And I said, you know, I've had it, I've done it, I got to do this show however many thousands of times, and so I was ready to say, okay, let's, you know, quit, you know, go out on a high note and just say goodbye gracefully, and that's what I chose to do.
How did you decide on law school following that?
Honestly, it was a bit of a cowardly choice. You know, the thing about being an actor is you never know where your next job is going to come from. It's always uncertain. And you know, from what I knew about law is, you know, you know, any English major can be a lawyer because it's all about language and aptitude for language on one level.
Right.
And I thought, well, I absolutely know I can get a job as a lawyer if I get into a good law school. I know I can get like a good job. And so it was a little bit of a hedge, you know, and a little bit of a safe choice.
But
Um,
you had just spent a large portion of your life doing the unsafe choice. So it makes sense. Like you had spent nearly a decade not knowing what was going to come next. It makes sense that you may want to know at a certain point.
yeah,
But
it definitely.
now you work for the Araca Group, which is a theatrical production company and branding company, which in my view sort of bridges those two interests for you. Is that how it is for you, or do you feel like it's um
Yes and no. I mean, yes, in that there is the joy of working at Araca is that it's full of, you know, old carnies, you know, like me who used to be on the stage. You know, you know, it was founded as a production company and they branched out into merchandising. So even now, you know, they were hiring accountants and account managers and designers and the like. Almost everyone who comes into the door, you know, has some passion for theater, you know, in their blood. So even if they're not working in theater, they appreciate it. And those people, you know, are my people, and they are fun to talk to. And it's a really wonderful group of folks to work with. The actual work I'm doing, I mean, it's still law. It's, you know, I draft the contracts, I negotiate the deals, you know, I set the policies and stuff. So but what it is nice to be doing that in a setting where your product, you know, ultimately is still theater or theater related. You know, it's different when, you know, when I was at a law firm, you know, I was negotiating contracts to buy, you know, rental car companies or, you know, manufacturers of some kind. And it's different when you go to a company in entertainment and you're like, we're talking about, you know, a contract with a singer or for a Broadway show. There's just an affinity that sort of draws you in and makes it a little it's just a little more fun to work in that line.
totally. To
So I feel
me,
very lucky, yeah, to have
yeah,
that job.
to me it feels like, yeah, you've had so many full circle moments, I feel like, in your life with that seems to bridge those two passions for you, and then also with your climatic return to Triangle, which was so beautiful. I have a sort of esoteric last question before we move on to our ending segment. I'm curious what you would say first to young Hans who was about to maybe pursue theater professionally, like right before you were graduating, and then to the Hans that was about to leave Cats and maybe go to law school. What would you say to those two versions of yourself?
Oh, what a great question. Um, you know, I'm not sure I would have given myself any different advice
Mm.
as young Hans, because I was very lucky in that I got, you know, good advice from my triangle choreographer. I love to point out, you know, and she said, give it a shot. you know, and then I had a lot of people helping me. A very dear friend was working at Steps and got me a scholarship, so I didn't have to pay for my dance classes, and I, you know, worked at the studio in exchange for that. So I really did take advantage. I would just say, you know, get a decent audition song, you know.
That is crucial.
Like I had no, I mean, this was the day when you had to go to the Lincoln Center Library and page through, but I had no imagination as to how to choose a song. And I think I would tell myself, be a little more adventurous. Like even if a song is sung by a woman, if that's your song, go ahead and sing Music in the Mirror, or, you know, sing something else that's not written for a tenor just because you're a tenor. And I don't know, I felt I was very late and slow to learn that lesson. And I think I don't know that it held me back. You know, I wasn't really going up for big vocal parts, but I think it would have given me more confidence if I had, you know, like a better book behind me when I was going into auditions.
Well, I think that is sort of a difference. Triangle obviously prepares you in many ways, as we discussed, in terms of scale and prep and stamina and things like that. But it is different from, you know, a traditional sort of pre-professional theater program. And I think in some ways that are good, as we discussed, but it's not a program that's like, here are some songs you should add to your book. That element you sort of have to figure out on your own.
And as to what I would tell myself leaving Cats, I might say be a little bolder. You know, don't feel like you have to leave all of theater behind when you leave the Winter Garden stage door. Because, you know, my greatest joy has been, you know, coming back to Triangle, you know, as an alum and, you know, previously a dancer, and getting to create theater again, you know, with, you know, some of my best friends from college, with the great Glenn Pinnell directing. You know, we were thick as thieves back in the day, and we were thick as thieves when we were putting the new shows together. You know, that was a thrill. And working with, you know, a new crop of students every year who love musical theater, and showing them how great Triangle can be. That was a thrill, and still is a thrill, because as you know, I reserve the freshman week show. There's one Triangle show I've kept in my back pocket that I still have my claws in. So I get a little bit of
Do you think it's going to
exposure.
happen this fall?
We sure hope so. I mean, you know, with things, if Broadway is opening in September, I don't see why McCarter Theater can't have the Triangle Freshman Week show in late August or early September. But we will hope. Yeah.
I can't wait.
Maybe we'll do something outside, or, you know, on a stage in the football stadium or something. Who knows?
We'll adapt. We're
got it.
adaptable. We're theater people are always adaptable. As you say, so much of, I mean, I think this has changed to some extent, but there is an element of theater that is learning the last part of the show 10 minutes before your first preview, as you say.
Yeah, or performing it in front of the salad bar in the cafeteria. It's totally fine. Like that is as legitimate a performance space as any.
We're getting to my final segment, which is called the Thank You Five segment. And it's 5.
You know, I love that phrase, thank you
Oh.
5, which of course I'd never heard until the Triangle kids kept saying it.
Really? You had never heard it?
I don't ever remember saying that, you know, back in the day. Thank you 5, but I love it.
I love it too. Clearly, because I named a segment after it. And it's just 5 rapid fire questions that I'd ask you to answer. First thing that comes to your head, but you don't have to answer. Some people have chosen not to answer the questions.
Okay. All right, I will do my best to answer.
Great. So my first question is your favorite memory from your time in Triangle as a student.
Oh, as a student, gosh, so many. I'm gonna pick one. It was dress rehearsal, and actually, it was the second dress run, because the dress rehearsal was so bad we had to do it again, starting at 1 in the morning.
Oh
and
my God.
So at the top of Act 2 was a huge dance number, and the women all took off their shirts and did it in their bras. And we thought it was the funniest thing we had ever seen. It was 3 in the morning, and we were just laughing.
I should mention, I haven't yet mentioned it, in the interest of getting viewership, you were famously Brooke Shields' dance partner, right?
Yes, I was. And I convinced her to audition for the Triangle show.
Iconic.
because I knew she was searching for it. We were in French class together, and we were study partners. And I said, you should try out for Triangle because I think you'd have a lot of fun.
And the rest
The
is
rest is
history.
history. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, the best and worst part about being in Cats on Broadway.
Oh, I mean, the best was just the sheer volume of dance. I mean, it was just, that the Jellicle Ball and the opening number, to dance to that was heaven, any single night. And as you know, I will do it at the drop of a hat. So, I still love it. The worst was just getting the makeup off your skin. Like you had to take a full-on shower, and I could never get the eyeliner out from under my eyes completely.
What did you do in between shows on 2 show days? I've always wondered.
We loved going to Wendy's. In like there, we were so Wendy Wednesdays. Like 4 of us would go out and grab Wendy's, and then we'd come back to the dressing rooms and sleep. We usually sleep for like an hour, and there were people sleeping like all over the dressing room, like under their makeup towels, and with their.
If you only get that one equity cot, can't all sleep. Speaking of equity, your craziest story about a non-equity or dinner theater show that you did.
I was doing, it's a story I like to tell. I was doing a production of Evita with a director that I thought he was a little bit crazy and maybe not too focused. And I was, of course, ensemble. But the Adrian Zemed, I don't know if you know that name, he was a big TV star in the 80s, and a big Broadway star from earlier in the original Grease, I think. He was playing Che. And so he was asking the director, we were doing the polo scene, and the polo scene is like, and then in the middle of it, Che appears as a narrator. And so I was standing next to Adrian Zemed, and he was going up to the director, and he said, so in this scene, so I'm narrating, so who am I? Am I a newscaster? Am I one of the aristocrats? Am I a person in the stand? Am I a polo? And the director said, you're just a freak up in the trees. And Adrian Zemed said, okay. And I watched him take his pencil, and next to his monologue, he wrote, freak in tree.
You've never told me that. That's an amazing story.
I love that story.
Oh my gosh. I have a story for you after that I will have to tell when we're not recording, apropos of that. Question number 4, your favorite, you may not want to answer this, but your favorite Triangle show during your tenure as choreographer.
Oh, yes. Well, as you know, I love them all. I'm going to go with a very controversial choice because none of my other professional collaborators, meaning Pete and Glenn, agree, but my favorite was Store Trek. I almost had a nervous breakdown doing it because I think it had 13 production numbers. So like I was really
running. It was like 2009, I feel.
2009, yeah. It was Sarah Anciller's debut. But if you go back and watch that, I mean, it had Cougar, it had a hoedown, it had like it had a space number, it had a revival meeting, it had a boy band number. It was great. So I've always looked at that one as one of my favorites.
I believe this is one of the other great things about Triangle, just like the lore and the history that each costume has when you put it on. But I believe in Zero Gravitas, we used Store Trek outfits for one of the numbers, I think.
Was it the Star Trek Beam Me Up? Yes. Another great number. Oh my gosh.
Iconic number.
Even though they made us cut the bridge. Remember that?
Well, when you gotta shorten the show for reunions, usually the bridge has gotta go.
It's just the first thing to go. Yeah.
Yeah. Or I love when I see Triangle shows with Alan now, we always try to guess what's gonna get cut for reunions. And usually it's we always have in contention the playoff to the kick line, but then it's always tricky because you may need it for the costume
Yeah,
change.
yeah. Those are important considerations when constructing your show. Don't be too quick to cut that stuff.
And my last question, do you have a dance move that in your arsenal that you can't live without?
Oh, this was a leading question, Katie, because it's it's the watch check
Of
for a
course.
triangle show.
Well, this was so fun, Hans, for many reasons. One, because I obviously love going down memory lane and the specificity that is the Princeton Triangle Club, but also you have this storied career as a dancer. And I think, as I said at the beginning, I think it's really valuable to focus sometimes on the experience of a chorus member or the ensemble. And as I said, too, I think a lot of these mega musicals, people sometimes look down on them, and I don't think that I think they're just as valuable to the art form as the golden age or the contemporary musicals that we like today. Do you have anything to add?
I just want to thank you for inviting me to this chat. I've had such a fun time speaking with you. You're gracious to entertain all of my memories, and I was happy to share them and happy to contribute to your project here, which I always enjoy seeing.
Well, thank you, Hans. You're the best guest, and it's a joy to talk to you. For Call Time viewers, we're going to have another interview episode next week, which will be really exciting. And then the following week, we're doing another special episode focusing on a specific play or musical soon to be announced. So that'll all be very exciting. And thank you for watching.